Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sammy and I am a dating and relationship coach for singles. Basically, what I do is I help people break down why their previous relationships didn't work, come up with some new dating patterns or traits that they would like to see in future partners so that they can have healthier relationships moving forward. That's just breaking it down into something really small. The purpose of this channel is very similar. I watch rom-coms and I break down the relationship dynamics between all of the characters, and I help you guys figure out what are toxic behaviors and what are potentially healthy behaviors from the characters. Some disclaimers. I don't own any of the material that I'm going to be covering today. My purpose with this is not to ruin rom-coms, despite the name of the channel. I actually would love for you guys to continue to enjoy watching rom-coms, but to view them through more of an educated lens. I see that the media tries to push really toxic relationship dynamics onto the mass public, which I actually felt, fatal to in my early relationships, because I didn't understand what healthy relationship dynamics look like. I had been chasing really intense, passionate relationships, thinking that that was what I was supposed to be doing, and that's what love was supposed to look like. So my hope, yes, is that by breaking down these dynamics for you guys, that you can view them from the entertainment view only, and that they don't necessarily mirror what real healthy relationships look like. But I am proud to say that today's movie actually depicts a healthy leading romance. This is actually my favorite rom-com of all time. I have not seen it be usurped yet. Last Christmas came pretty close, but this is actually a really healthy relationship dynamic with a real person. Just as an alert, there are spoilers ahead. So if you have not watched today's movie, I beg you to please pause my video, go watch it. It's only an hour and a half long, and then come back to my video so that you can be a little more engaged with these relationship dynamics that I'm gonna break down. Cool. Proceed with caution. I will be doing a quick synopsis after this. So if you haven't seen this one in a while, or you're not really sure if you're really interested in this one, hopefully this synopsis will help. I plan to make it short, but every time I plan for that, I make it extremely long and give you guys a full play-by-play. So hopefully I get it right this time and I can make this a pretty short synopsis so we can actually tackle these relationship dynamics. Cool. Okay, so today's movie is, again, my favorite rom-com. Fun fact, my mom was actually pregnant with me when she went to go see this movie in theaters, and it just always holds just such a really soft place in my heart. And again, I do think this is actually a really healthy representation of what real relationships look like and should potentially look like. So I'm really excited to dissect this one with you guys today. It stars Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal, who I think make actually a really, really good pair. They have a really fun, interesting dynamic where they're very opposite, which I'll get into. And yeah, it's got great music. It's just perfect. I love this movie. So I'm very excited to get into this with you. So let's go ahead and get into the synopsis. I don't know if I said the name of this movie in but yes, we're going to be covering When Harry Met Sally. Okay, so synopsis. We start this movie with Sally Albright and Harry Burns. They are meeting for the very first time. Sally is going to be driving both her and Harry cross country. It's not really cross country. It's from Chicago to New York. It's an 18-hour trip. Harry is dating Sally's best friend in college. Her name is Amanda something. They seem really hot and heavy. Harry gets in the car. They start the most hellish 18-hour road trip to New York City, where he's pretty rude to her and makes a lot of assumptions about her, makes a pass at her while he's he's dating her best friend. It just altogether, they are very opposite. They have very different views of the world. It's really setting us off onto this story of how two people are so very opposite and yet somehow come together. So they go on this trip, they make it to New York, and they go their separate ways. And I'm sure Sally is so excited to never see this person again. I'm surprised she even let him continue on this trip with her to New York. So they separate only to meet years later. Sally is with a boyfriend. His name is Joe. They are making out at the airport before Sally is getting on a flight to, is it Indianapolis, I think? Anyway, she's flying a ways away where it's going to be an overnight trip. So they're having this long goodbye. And, you know, this is the 80s, so things were very different. These goodbyes felt monumental. So Harry walks by and does a double take, and we assume as the audience that he's recognizing Sally, who he took this 18-hour hellish road trip with, but actually he recognizes Joe. Him and Joe, I think, potentially worked together at some point. They were colleagues of some kind, so they have an interaction, and during that interaction, Sally now recognizes Harry and is like, oh God, please don't recognize me. And so he walks away, or Harry walks away. She says goodbye to Joe. He says, I love you for the first time. And she goes, I love you too. And gets on the flight and she's all happy and, you know, sitting on her thing in her chair and orders a meticulous drink, which this is a running thread with Sally, is she is a very meticulous orderer. She has a very specific way of ordering things. And this is what triggers Harry, who happens to be sitting in the aisle right behind her. It triggers his memory and he goes, Sally, we went on a road trip from Chicago to New York together. She is not pleased that he recognizes her, and the man sitting next to her offers up his seat to Harry so that they can catch up some more, which is not pleasing for Sally. So they spend this whole flight, again, arguing about things. Harry does not stop talking. He continues to talk her ear off up until they get to the airport, and he asks her if she would like to go to dinner. She says she has a boyfriend, and he's like, no, I just mean as friends, which it continues actually. He had started this argument that men and women cannot be friends because there's always going to be this sexual attraction element involved. She brings up his argument again, and he says, I would never say that. But actually, he then goes on to work himself through the argument about them being with other people right now so that they can't act on those impulses, even if they had that attraction to each other. But then he works himself back into this spiral where he concludes again that no, men and women cannot be friends because there is always going to be that sexual attraction element involved. So Sally just goes, bye, Harry, and leaves. She does not want to continue these exhausting exchanges with him, which I get. So they go their separate ways again. We find years later, I think this is 6 years later at this point. So I think each time jump is 6 years. So it is now 12 years since they first met-ish, something like that. Oh yeah, so this second time jump is 5 years later because Sally is now 31. She is with her friends. She's explaining that she broke up with Joe. She's not too torn up about it because she's realized that she would be settling if she were to continue with him. One of her friends, her best friend, Marie is a little stressed for Sally because Marie's dating a married man who she believes is going to leave his wife for her. And everyone keeps telling her, no, he's never going to leave her. She then starts to push her own kind of fears onto Sally about like, you know, someone is going to be married to your husband because you took time off from dating. Which, what? What kind of logic is that, Marie? Sally seems pretty at peace with her decision, and it seems like she's resolute and made the right decision for herself. We find her and Marie later at a bookstore. Oh, first, we find Harry and his best friend Jess at I believe a baseball game. It's a sporting event of some kind, but I believe it's a baseball game. And Harry is explaining his divorce and his separation to his wife Helen, who he had brought up that he was getting engaged to her or getting married to her soon the last time that he had met Sally. So he is now separating and getting a divorce from Helen, and he seems very torn up about it at this point. And him and Jess have a conversation about it. Like, I think Helen tells him they can date other people or they try to date each other again, and he's just like, what? Just really struggling with that news. So then he's kind of going into depressed mode. We find him in the self-help aisle of a bookstore, and we find Sally and Marie there, and he's peering over a little book and staring at her, and Marie catches Sally's attention, catches that this man is staring at her. And he walks over and he's like, oh, Sally, it's you. It's me, Harry Burns. We went on that road trip together 11 years ago. And we ran into each other on the flight. So they reconnect and they start talking. I think this ends up being a really pleasant conversation between the two of them. They both seem to have separated from long-term partners right around the same time. Neither of them are really looking to jump into something, but I think that they find a lot of common ground with each other. So at one point, Harry looks at her and is like, are we becoming friends? And it starts us off where they become inseparable in a way, where they spend a lot of time together. They go and get dinner together every so often. They go to the movies. They go to museums. He helps her with her Christmas tree. So they do a lot of things together. They fall asleep on the phone together, but they keep emphasizing that Harry has told Sally, like, you're the most attractive woman that I'm not attracted to. So they've set this like boundary that this is purely a friendship, which is something that Harry said he can't have with women, or that it's not possible to have with women. So they are actually finding that because they are both in these grieving periods for their life until Sally starts dating again, which kind of pushes Harry to begin dating again. They both kind of have terrible dates, but they have different philosophies on dating and what level of intimacy that you are ready for it at different times. So they introduce each other's best friends to the other. So Sally sets Marie on a date with Harry, and Harry sets Sally up on a date with his best friend Jess. They all go to dinner together. It's a lovely blind double date. What ends up happening is that Marie and Jess actually connect and would rather go date each other and not Harry and Sally, which is pretty funny. Yeah, so then we go through some different periods of them dating some people. Marie and Jess get engaged. And then we have a moment where Sally finds out that Joe, her ex-boyfriend, is getting married to someone else, someone he just met. And this was something that was like a point of contention for her, that she decided she actually really wanted to get married and she thought he never would, but actually he didn't want to marry her. So this kind of sets her off a little bit, and she recognizes that she doesn't want to be with Joe. It's just that, this kind of hits in a way and it hurts. So Harry comes to console her. They end up having sex and getting together. It becomes very weird, where Sally is like, she seems to be very happy about this and very loved and nurtured, and seems to be very interested in this, what's happening. And Harry could not be more distant and more awkward. So they end up trying to tell each other that it's a mistake. All of their friends have wanted them to be together. I think everyone else sees the potential between them, that they just kind of get each other in a weird way, even though they are still so opposite and rarely agree on anything. But this continues on, where I think Harry really didn't want to ruin the friendship, and I think Sally is just feeling like you can't go back after that. Earlier, Harry meets Helen, his ex-wife's new fiance. I think they're getting married, or they are married, or something like that. So he kind of goes through his own depressed period. So they both watch their ex-partners move on, and they are still both stuck in, this mode where they just can't seem to move on. Their best friends get married. Harry tries to fix things at the wedding, but ends up being very offensive towards her. I think he calls her a dog, and she gets very upset at that, rightfully so. Yeah, she basically tells him, like, I'm not your consolation prize. You don't just have me when things don't work out with other people. So things move along, and Harry desperately tries to make things up with her, leaves her multiple voicemails, can't seem to come up with the right words. So Sally ends up going to a New Year's party, dancing and just not having fun, and it's trying to leave before midnight. Harry's walking the streets of New York alone, and their relationship flashes before his eyes in a way, and he recognizes, oh, I'm in love with Sally. So he races across town, because you can't find a taxi at this hour, and Uber and Lyft did not exist in the 80s. And he's just running through the streets of New York to get to the party that Sally's at, because all of their friends are there. And he finds her, and he tells her that he's in love with her, and she's like, what? Like, you can't just do that. You can't just come here and say that and not mean it. And he basically tells her all of the things that he loves about her, all of these just very specific details that you have to know about somebody that you're in love with, basically. And he says, like, I came tonight to you, not because it's New Year's and not because I'm lonely. It's because I realize that you're the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with, and I want that to start now. So she just like turns into putty, and they kiss, and then 3 months later they get married, and that's the end. Awesome. Okay, so that one was decently short, I hope. Cool. Okay, so now I'm gonna go into relationship dynamics. Yay! Okay, so now getting into the relationship dynamics of the characters, I am going to start with Harry and his very first girlfriend at the very beginning of the movie, Amanda. This is a very short relationship, so this will be succinct. But basically, when we first see them together, they're just like making out and all over each other, super PDA, and not really aware of what's happening outside of this embrace. Amanda tells him, call me on the road. And this is an 18-hour trip. You can't text, so you can't text someone. It's a little difficult because you have to find a payphone, and it's asking your best friend Sally to go out of her way so that your boyfriend can just call you and I don't know, talk to you for a while. I don't know what she's expecting from this phone call, but maybe it's just a check-in. I'm sure it's light, but it comes off very needy, and it comes off as very codependent behavior is kind of my impulse. We find out later that Harry doesn't even remember her name. Obviously, this doesn't seem like this was as impactful of a relationship on him. We also find that he makes a pass at Sally, which is a disrespect to his own relationship with her best friend, Amanda. So this is a pretty toxic relationship, and I understand why it didn't work out. I mean, also, there's a huge amount of distance between them, and I don't think that you could just call across state lines very easily. I think that costs more money. So I think that there's lots of reasons that compiled into why that relationship did not work out. Yeah, so a little bit of codependency. I'd say toxicity wise, I don't know. It's probably harmless. Harry doesn't seem very interested in too many people. He seems very interested in sex only. So I would say he's probably in this relationship at like a 6 or 7. I'll just say 7 just because it doesn't seem that he's as invested, and that he seems like he's in a very narcissistic phase where it's all about Harry, and he doesn't seem too concerned with Amanda, and Amanda seems to be a very anxious attachment where she needs that assurance that he's okay. I am going to move on to Sally and Amanda. This is just a friendship, and we don't see very much of it, but what we do see is that Amanda doesn't even acknowledge that her friend showed up. Her friend is offering to drive her boyfriend cross country. There's no real interaction between the two of them, so the fact that they're depicted as best friends is really unbelievable. It's hard for me to believe them as best friends because, yeah, I mean, we just don't really see a ton of interaction between the two. There's not really an acknowledgement from Amanda. And then again, Sally doesn't remember Amanda's name all those years later at the airport when she's trying to remember her. So probably not the closest relationship if you can't remember your friend's name, who's somebody you're supposed to be close to in college. After, I think it had been 6 years at that point. So again, probably not a healthy relationship, but it's hard for me to put it on a toxicity scale because I don't really have the information. So I guess I should just put it at a 5 for now because it's not overwhelmingly healthy. I don't love that her supposed best friend didn't acknowledge her when she showed up and doesn't really show much concern for Sally and where Sally's going. She seems to be very transfixed and all about her boyfriend Harry. The next one that I'm going to cover is going to be Sally and Joe. So Joe is the very serious long-term boyfriend that Sally has midway or probably towards the beginning of the movie, but this is the first relationship that we actually see her in. She talks about a previous boyfriend who had jealousy issues, but I don't meet him in this movie, so I'm not going to go over him. There. Sally and Joe. Well, they both start out making out with each other at an airport, saying goodbye, so there's a lot of physical affection there. He seems, decently into her. It seems like a throwaway when he says, "I love you," right before she leaves, like he's caught up in the heat of the moment, and that's the first time he says, "I love you," and Sally seems very surprised by that. Sally is a very practical woman, but she also reciprocates and says, "I love you" back. We find out that the two of them kind of build a life together for the next 6 years that we don't see Sally or Harry after this airport trip. Their relationship consisted of that they didn't want to have kids. They weren't really looking to get married. They weren't engaged for those 6 years. They saw all of their friends getting married, having kids, and being stuck, and that they didn't have a sex life after. And so I think they were really trying to avoid that. They wanted the ability to just jet off to Rome at a moment's notice or wherever they wanted to go. They really wanted that freedom. But then there was a moment where Sally is with her cousin's kid or her best friend's kid. There's somebody's child. She spends time with them. She spends an afternoon, I think, babysitting them. There's a moment where she realizes, oh, I want to be a mom. I want commitment. I want to settle down, and I want that life. And she confronts Joe about it, and he is not interested in that. He was really okay with the life that they had built and thought that she was too. So that is what ultimately causes Sally to leave that relationship, because she recognizes that it would be settling to stay, and she wants more than what he's able to give at that point. I think it's really mature. It's hard for me to make this a toxic relationship because I think that they both did everything right. I think they both communicated their needs. The one thing is that there just wasn't compromise there for their visions, and that they just didn't agree on what they saw in the future at a certain point. So it seems that they just diverged and they grew apart, which is natural and it's normal. He actually goes so far as to call Sally to let her know that he is engaged and he's getting married to someone else. So I think there's actually, I can't say that that's like full of ill intent or, that he's being malicious towards her. But it seems like there is this care, like not blindsiding her, because they did have such a long-term relationship that they had just gotten out of, and he's getting married so quickly after her to someone else. But I think it's very mature of them both to recognize, especially, Sally, for her to recognize that this is not the relationship that she envisions for herself, and to be willing to walk away from that. So I think toxicity-wise, I think this is actually really, really not toxic. I think that this is probably somewhere at like a 2 or a 3. But yeah, maybe let's just go with a 2, because it seems like there really isn't a toxic element to what broke them up. It was just simply that they grew apart. Really couldn't make it work. So yeah, there's like a lack of compromise. Sure, you can make that case, but it's okay. It's okay to grow apart. It's not a toxic behavior to have different wants and needs, and for those wants and needs that you had originally discussed for them to change. But it is toxic to withhold that, but neither of them do. So yeah, so it's probably a 1 or 2. Good job. Good job. Healthy relationship, guys. Even if it didn't work, healthy example. Let's get into Harry and Helen next. So Helen is, of course, Harry's first wife that Harry is getting engaged to the second time we see him. She seems to be like a very successful woman. When Harry talks about getting married to her, it sounds like he's settling. He says something like, I am getting married to her because it like came a point in my life where the thought of being single much longer and being a bachelor for my life just felt very uninteresting and sad, and so I think it's time for me to just commit. So his answer to that was just like, yikesville. So and then the way that Helen breaks up with him, she doesn't tell him when she starts to feel these feelings for him fade. She plans a week in advance for movers to come and take all of her stuff out. She lies to him about the reason why she's leaving and tries to tell him that they can continue dating and to maybe just give them some space and have her move out into a friend's apartment that's going to be vacant for a while to give her an opportunity to clear her head and see if the feelings come back. All of that's a lie. She has found someone else, Ira, so she's cheated on him, and she's moving in with him straight out of Harry's apartment, or their apartment together, which is a beautiful apartment, by the way. Oh my God. Really toxic behavior, if you ask me. So I can't imagine this relationship to be healthy. Gosh, yeah, that's gotta be an 8 or 9. This doesn't seem abuse involved. So maybe an 8. I would say when things escalate to abuse being involved, I probably would, bring it up to 9/10s. So it's not like she's abusing him. She's just lying. And then, yeah, of course she's cheating. And it's actually really serious relationship that she's left him for. I think at that time, Harry's not necessarily a healthy partner. It seems that he's fallen into codependent ways where his whole life just stops when Helen leaves, and he was devastated. And it seems that Helen is the anxious attachment at this point who just leaves and moves on and just really is withholding. So the moment she tells him, the movers come in and move everything out, and he's like, what? He's just blindsided. So yeah, I'm gonna have to say toxicity wise, it's probably around an 8. Okay, so let's go into these platonic friendships. We have Sally and Marie. These seem to be like really, really good best friends, looking out for each other. I think Sally is, again, just a really healthy participant in her relationships. I know Marie all the time comes to her with her relationship woes, and she'll listen to what Marie has to say. And the moment that Marie says, in this married man dynamic, because Marie is again dating a married man, Sally will go, yeah, he's never gonna leave her. And she'll just confirm everything that Marie says, but she's not really pushing Marie to leave this relationship so much as she's just echoing that voice in Marie's head, the intuitive voice that's saying, this guy is using you. So I think Sally she's just so healthy and I love her. Yeah, Sally takes a really healthy approach in this where, she is nurturing towards Marie and really looking out for her best interest. And I think so far, she will take Marie out on a date with another guy to try to help Marie get over somebody who is just not committing to her in the way that she deserves, of course with her consent. I think the only toxic behaviors that we see is Marie will push her own kind of anxiety and fear onto Sally. So when Sally chooses to be single and leaves a long-term relationship, which is kind of not the thing to do in the 80s and before that, is just commit to someone. We see Marie kind of blurt out all of these anxieties that I think women of this time had, which was you're going to be single for the rest of your life. Your biological clock is ticking. Aren't you worried that all the good ones are going to be taken? And she starts going through a Rolodex and trying to hook Sally up with somebody new as quickly as possible. And Sally's just no, I'm going to take my time with this. I'm not in a rush. I want to grieve this relationship. And I'm okay with being single, and I'm just going to let things happen organically. And, Marie really backs off on that, and I don't think Marie really tries to push her onto anybody else from there on out. And so I think that she means well, but I think, again, the only toxic behavior is really her pushing her own anxieties onto Sally up until Marie actually settles down with Jess. She just is girl, you gotta be with Harry. She doesn't push it too much and she doesn't try to make it happen. But when it does happen, she's oh, hallelujah. This was always supposed to happen. And then when Sally's oh, and it wasn't great. And she's oh, I'm so sorry. Well, at least you know now and you guys can still be friends. So I think they both are really supportive to each other. So I'm gonna say toxicity level, this is probably, let's just say it's a 3. Yeah. Because I think it's very similar to the wedding planner in a way but I think this is a more supportive relationship where they listen to each other and care about each other. If it wasn't for that one thing of Marie trying to push her anxieties onto her best friend, then this would probably be one of the healthiest best friend relationships that we see. Okay, so now let's do Harry and Jess. The 2 male best friends in this movie. So Harry and Jess, this is such a healthy male friendship that we see depicted Oh my God, I didn't think that I would find a healthy male dynamic. Man, I'm so happy about this. When we first meet Jess, they're of course at, sporting event. I think it's baseball, where Harry is telling Jess all about his separation with his wife, and Jess seems to be very supportive. And he's not trying to fix it, but he is helping Harry work through what is happening in his life. And also, Jess kind of offers insider things as well. Jess is a writer for New York Magazine, so it seems that he is connected to his feelings and words, and with a profession like that, I think that makes him a lot more accessible as a best friend. And they're really funny together, and Jess just has he tries to understand. He tries to understand Harry, and he tries to understand what Harry wants, or he's looking out for him. The point where Harry tries to set Jess up on the date with Sally. Jess cannot understand why Harry wouldn't want to be with Sally if they get along so well, if they're best friends, and if Harry does find Sally attractive. Just like, what is wrong with this woman? Like, you speak so highly of her. Why are you not with her? And thankfully, Jess does not find her attractive, because then we would be missing the dynamic with Harry and Sally. I think that this is actually a really, really healthy male friendship that I'm just so excited to have. I just cannot believe that we have it. So I think toxicity scale wise, I'm gonna put Harry and Jess at a 2, because I don't remember Harry or Jess having any kind of toxic behaviors with Harry. I don't remember Harry having toxic behaviors with Jess. I think they both are very supportive. Harry sets Jess up on a date with his best friend, hoping that'll work out. So I think that there's a really healthy dynamic between them, and I'm so happy to see that. Okay, so let's do Marie and Jess next. So Marie and Jess are, of course, Sally and Harry's best friends, respectively. They meet each other on the double-blind date that goes awry, where they were each supposed to be dating Harry or Sally, and they end up finding each other and connecting. Marie randomly quotes something that Jess had written in New York Magazine, and Jess is like, I've never had my work quoted back to me, and Marie's like, I've never quoted anybody's work before. So they just have like this serendipitous connection, and they just are really interested in each other. And they go off to get together, they move in together, they get engaged, and then they get married. All of the interactions that we see with them, we only see one kind of big fight between the two of them. In it, when they're moving in, Jess is trying to bring in all of this like bachelor pad furniture, and Marie is really not having that. Not on here today. She does not want any of that furniture in the house, and I think that her wording is a little poor, where she tells him that she's trying to help him have some taste, which of course anyone would find that really offensive, because we all have different taste levels and we all like different things. Some people have a taste that's a little more universal, and some people have a taste that's very unique. Jess is very unique. He has a wagon wheel coffee table. They get into an argument over who's right, who should get to keep what. And at that point, Harry is having kind of a rough patch after finding out that he meets Ira, the man that Helen left him for. And so he's obviously having a rough day, and he takes it out on everyone and basically tells them, better start keeping a ledger of what is yours and what isn't, because then you'll spend thousands of dollars in divorce court fighting over a plate. Eventually this ugly wagon wheel coffee table will be something that will rip you guys to shreds. This actually helps Marie and Jess make up, because they realize, wow, we're really fighting over things that are so inconsequential. Marie looks at him and says, I will never want that ugly wagon wheel coffee table. Yeah, so they have lots of moments where there's a lot of genuine love and care between them. They seem to really care for their friends and want their friends to be happy, and they don't close themselves off. So I think that's really healthy behavior. They go to lots of parties together. They can separate. Marie will spend time with Sally separately without Jess, and Jess will spend time with Harry separately still. So I think this is actually a really healthy depiction of a secondary relationship too. And yeah, so I would say toxicity level, these guys are probably, yeah, like a 2-ish. You know, fights are normal. I'm not going to dock them for having a fight because that is absolutely normal. I think that language could potentially be less hurtful in those fights, but it's the only fight that we see. And I think otherwise it's a very loving, caring relationship where they look out for each other. So yeah, let's just put them in a 2. They're awesome. Yay. Yay, Jess Marie. That's way healthier than her attachment to somebody who is already attached and has their own family. So let's just dive into Harry and Sally. The major driving point of this movie is, based off the synopsis of this, is that they are opposites who attract, and they start out absolutely hating each other. Then they grow to being indifferent, and then they grow to becoming friends, and then they grow into falling in love, just being happy. And it's not instantaneous. It takes them 12 years and 3 months for all of this to happen. So it really is a movie about growth, that feelings can grow over time. This is actually the way that I think relationships should happen. I think that you should have a healthy foundation of friendship first, and then if there is an attraction there, then you can take it a step further. But it's not feeling obligated to that. So I do think that men and women can be friends and not have sex or like a romantic relationship be involved in that. But I think that for successful relationships, what I've noticed, if you're someone who has found that other relationships haven't helped in the past or worked, that starting from a foundation of friendship seems to be a really, really ultra healthy way of maintaining boundaries, having good communication skills with someone, trusting someone. Yeah, just having like a really good foundation works. So that's what this movie depicts. Anyways, so in the beginning, when they hate each other, yeah, it's toxic. And I don't think that's Sally's fault. I think that Sally is actually the practical one. I think she stands her ground. I think she is really good at putting up boundaries. And I think that she actually helps set the precedent with Harry of how their relationship is going to be, and that it's going to be healthy, and that they are not going to cross boundaries, and that she's not going to allow him to infiltrate her boundaries early on. Because he, in the beginning, I think he struggles with boundaries because it seems like he has a lot of codependent behavior. He kind of doesn't care that he's in a relationship with her best friend and tries to make a slight pass at her. Even if it's a joke or not, I think that's pretty telling of who he is, because if she would have said yes, I'm sure he would have been like, cool, awesome, let's do this, and not had any kind of regard for either girl. I think that probably creates some respect in Harry for Sally, that she's just not going to be that girl. It doesn't mean Sally's better than anyone for not jumping at him right away, but I think with a man like Harry, I think that is one way to earn his respect, is by not showing attraction to him, or playing into his games rather, which is not really Sally's intention. I don't think she really cares what Harry thinks. But yeah, so they make it through that interaction, and this seems to be like fate is heavily involved in this relationship, where it just seems like serendipity, it's kismet, where they just keep ending up in the same place at the same time, and they always end up being in around the same place in their lives around each other, which is really interesting. So the next time that we see them, it seems like Harry's really trying to make things up to her. He seems to still have kind of weird codependent behavior, but when she sets boundaries, he's a lot more respectful this time. And, Sally still does not seem to be interested in having a friendship, which is totally fine. Very healthy of her to make that clear. She's not a people pleaser, even though she is very nice and sweet and comes off as a very loving person. So I think she's a really good example for people pleasers, that you can still be seen as sweet, wonderful, loving, kind, and still maintain a boundary of yes, no, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do that. Just being very firm in your boundaries. Then the next time that we meet them, they're both in kind of a grieving place where they are kind of ready to have a mature friendship with a man or a woman, someone of the perceived opposite gender. So this is good. They seem ready for a friendship at this point, the next time that they meet. We see them come from a very healthy place, and I think for codependents especially, to come at relationships from a place of a friendship first and to not have the intention of pursuing someone romantically is maybe the healthiest way for codependents to move forward. So if you know that you're codependent, or if you are someone who is maybe avoidantly attached to people, who you're a little more standoffish, have trouble connecting to people emotionally, maybe you are someone who connects too easily and is a very anxious attachment, I think this is actually a really healthy road to approach relationships from. Definitely, this could be your movie to watch for examples on how to combat codependency. Yeah, so they approach it from a very purely friendship level, that they are just going to be friends, and I think that they create a lot of solace for each other. They help each other through this hard time in their life. They support each other through new relationships. I think that Sally catches feelings for Harry earlier than Harry catches on. There's a few moments where she asks him out and he's just like, oh, it's so great to have a friend that's a woman. And he's like, and I don't think you're attractive at all. I mean, you're beautiful, but I'm not attracted to you. And you see a little bit of disappointment on Sally's face. So I think there's a few times where they hint that Sally has caught feelings that are deeper than just at a platonic level for Harry sooner than Harry realizes. And I think it takes Harry a little longer to catch up in that realm. But just, it's not a bad thing. Again. So I think for the most part, they have really healthy communication skills. I think that they are able... with Harry, he comes off very narcissistic in the beginning, and he slowly starts to develop some empathy for other people over the course of the movie as we see him. I think him getting his heart broken by Helen really gives him a big dash of empathy. And I think that he has a very strong opinion, and I think Sally actually has really strong opinions, and they both feel comfortable enough to be able to express those opinions, even though they are always on the opposite side. They don't get overly heated with each other. I think that they argue in a very healthy way. That's actually really endearing. And there is a moment where they actually are having it out for the first time, where they are getting everything off their chest that they think about the other person and their grieving process. And there's the best moment from Harry, which I think is the biggest moment of growth for him, is when Sally's, just letting him have it with how she feels, because he's kind of triggered this emotional response in her. And he has a moment where he just lets her finish, and then he calmly asks, "Are you finished?" And she says yes, and he says, can I say something? And she says yes. And he apologizes and he says, "I'm so sorry." And he gives her a big hug. And for him to recognize that he was coming from a selfish place in the argument earlier and having kind of a disregard for people's feelings in that argument and kind of just thinking of his own feelings and her calling him out on it, I think he really recognizes his faults through her and that she is a strong enough person to be able to communicate when she is feeling hurt by him and when he is hurting other people, and he is able to recognize it and to make those changes accordingly and try to do better, and that he can actually apologize to her. Oh my God, so good growth. I love this movie. It continues on until they sleep together. So I think them sleeping together is a huge pivotal moment in their relationship. It's on accident. Harry is consoling Sally in that moment. She's very upset, and it just kind of happens. And it seems like Sally is very happy about it. Harry is not. He gets really weird, and that puts a huge strain on their relationship because I think Sally at that point has recognized that she can't go back to just being friends that easily. She needs time to, if he's truly not interested, that she needs time to kind of let those feelings go, and she needs space to be able to do that. And I think Harry had made it clear that he was not interested in pursuing her romantically. So I think that they both tried to do this in the best way that they could, maneuver this. But what ends up happening, this is where a little bit of toxic behavior comes up, where he struggles to be alone. I think Sally has become his emotional support through the span of time after his divorce. I think Sally is strong enough to recognize that she deserves better than being somebody's, just simply their support system or their consolation prize, as she puts it. And that he needs to recognize that if they can go back to being friends, she needs time to be able to let those romantic feelings go that have just surged up, and that she can't just go into being his best friend again without, these feelings. She has to take care of herself first. I think that they're both really kind of struggling to maneuver this until we get to the point where, Harry calls her a dog, which isn't cool, but I think he's really struggling to understand why things are so complicated now, and I think he really truly values her and is very scared about losing her in his life because she is so pivotal and monumental to him, until we get to the point where he finally realizes that's the woman I'm in love with. He reflects on the whole relationship, everything that they have done and been through, and realizes that she's actually the person that he's in love with, and he's been afraid to commit to somebody again. This is me putting my own spin on this, but it seems like he had been running away from this relationship because he had been hurt so badly in the previous one. And since he is a codependent, you either are anxious attachment or you can flip into being an avoidant. And so I think he switches between the two. And at that point, I think he had been very avoidant and didn't want to chance getting hurt again. And so, I think abandoning before you're abandoned is probably the term. I think in that moment, he realizes he can't lose her, races to be with her. And instead of, Sally just immediately taking him back, I think the healthiest thing that she does is question it and say, you can't just choose to be with me because you're lonely. That's not fair to me. I think him telling her exactly how he feels and that all of the reasons why he's in love with her actually convince her that, this is real and this is what she wants too. They seem very happy. They do a little wedding synopsis thingy, and then they just kind of live off happily ever after, we assume, So I think that they actually have a super healthy relationship. I mean, they go through that rough patch, absolutely, but I think where they come out on the other side is that they have this true understanding, and I think that they have just such good communication skills with each other. They showcase that even if you don't agree, you can listen to the other person's side, and you can either have healthy banter with them without making them feel small or dumb or insignificant. You can hear the other side, and you can have fun being opposite and thinking oppositely to somebody else while still maintaining just like a love, care, and respect for each other. And that, yeah, like, oh, they're so healthy. Yeah, they're probably at least like a 2. I want to say 1 just because I'm so happy with all of the growth that they go through. So you know what? I love this movie so much. I'm just going to say toxicity scale 1. This is my example of how to build a healthy relationship and to potentially create one that lasts for a long time. Having good communication skills with each other, being able to be honest even about the hard things. How do you argue with each other? Are you able to say sorry when you've hurt someone's feelings or when you're in the wrong? Can you tell someone how you feel? Can you maneuver the lines between friendship and romance? Honoring boundaries and not trying to cross somebody's boundaries when they're not willing to let that down. And, you know, how do you cross a boundary when somebody is willing to, you know, let that boundary down with you? This movie is such a good example of all of that. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? This is probably another long one. So all my videos are probably just really long. Sorry. Yeah, let me know in the comments. Do you agree? Do you think this is a super healthy relationship? Or did you catch on to some things that you found to be extremely toxic? Yeah, let me know. I'd love to have a conversation about it. And yeah, so I guess that's our video for this week. I will see you guys next week. I thought that When Harry Met Sally would be kind of a fun New Year's movie. We're in a new year, even though it's not New Year's Eve, but I wanted to do kind of a classique. And yeah, okay. So yeah, if you found this video to be helpful, go ahead and hit that little thumbs up button to let me know that you like what I'm doing. If you don't like something that I'm doing, please leave me a comment below. I love hearing feedback. I have no idea what people want to see or what they're liking, so I'm trying a couple different things as I go, see what sticks. And yeah, please go ahead and share this with a friend or a loved one who you want to see in healthy relationships moving forward if you found this video to be helpful. And hit the subscribe button and the little bell to be notified whenever I post a new video in the future, so you can always be in the loop. Okay, so yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Please take care of yourselves. Please, tell your loved ones how you feel every day. I know that we can't always be near each other during a pandemic, but, please just take some time to check in on your loved ones and make sure that they're doing okay. Even if it's just a little text message, say, hey, I'm thinking of you. Send flowers to somebody that you love today. Oh my gosh, make their day. And yeah, drink lots of water and eat good food and take care of yourselves. I'll see you next week. Bye.